You're listening to SM Media, the #1 place for exclusive content.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of All Time 11 right here on SM Media. I'm Scott McPike, delighted to be your host as always. I'm joined by a very special guest. I'm delighted to welcome the former chief writer for the Scottish Sun, one of my heroes in the newspapers, Iain King. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you on, Iain. Thanks very much for joining me.
Pleasure, Scott. Pleasure. Happy to be doing it. Thanks for having me on.
How are you doing? All right?
Great, yeah, great. I'm in Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia, quarantining before I start my job as technical director here with United DFC. So really looking forward to the job, but just trying to battle through 2 weeks of quarantine. But life here's a wee bit back to normal, so we're in better shape than you guys. But
brilliant. I wish that was the same here. What's it like, basically, when you're looking back at like Scottish football? What's it like for you? Like, how hard is it to kind of find out what's going on back here? Because obviously you're involved in it for so long.
Yeah, I think I came to Canada in 2017, and at the start I was just so kind of engrossed in trying to make my way in as a full-time coach that I probably lost touch a little bit with it. But then obviously you get back into it, and then I started doing the BBC Scotland podcast because I'd brought in Michael Stewart as a columnist at the Sun, and I always like listening to Michael.
Right.
It can cause trouble in an empty house, Michael, but he's good fun to listen to, and I think he talks a lot of sense. So I started listening to that, and Neil McCann, guys that I'd known, during my writing career, and I enjoy that one, and I still enjoy the Clyde Super Scoreboard phone in every now and again, and listening to my old colleague Hugh Keevins from the Sunday Mail. So I keep up to date with those podcasts, and I always think back to that writing team at the Sunday Mail. Was Gordon Waddle was the columnist. We had myself, Hugh Keevins, and Mark Goody. That was a pretty good team. You know, when I look back on that, it's probably the strongest writing desk I was on. And Shug's a legend. I love listening to Shug. He's a legend. So I keep up to date with those two, and I see all the games. So I actually watched us qualifying for the Euros. We were in the middle of a lockdown in Toronto, where it was before, and I watched it on a patio. It was about -2, and you weren't allowed inside the pub. But I watched it on my laptop in a patio, and when my apartment was in Greektown, screaming at the laptop. So that was a bit weird. I was thinking that the last time we qualified for finals, I was there at France '98, and then here I am in some patio in Toronto, screaming when Big Marsh made the save. So it was great.
Brilliant. See when you were reporting and kind of stories. What was your kind of favourite memories of like Scottish football when you were doing? Like, you obviously were. I think was it 20 years you were at the Sunday Mail and the Sun.
Yeah. Went to the Sun from the Ardrossan and Saltcoats Herald in 1991, and then I was 24 years altogether. And then left the Sun as head of sport in 2015. So I think that the favourite memories when you're a writer will always be the major tournaments. I did 2 European Championships, 2 World Cup finals, and loved it. You know, like I was at Euro 96, obviously, when Scotland qualified, and then France 98. And then after that, you just start thinking, at that point, I remember thinking, this just happens every 2 years. We'll be at finals, and to be, well, it'll be, 23 years, staggering, you know, like, so next summer's going to be, I hope everybody's back in the stadiums for the games at Hampden, and obviously Wembley on a Friday night would be, I might come back for that one if somebody's getting any tickets. But, those games are going to be amazing. So I think like probably the big European nights, Seville with Celtic was unbelievable, you know. I like a lot of the writers like that had basically mentored me. Ken Gallagher was a massive figure in my life, and he said to me, you know, no Scottish team will reach a final in your lifetime, son. And then obviously Celtic and Seville, Rangers and Manchester. Yeah. So those nights were special nights. And in Scotland at France '98, like walking out and like being in, it was unbelievable. I got the best press box draw you'll ever get for the Scotland-Brazil opener in the Stade de France. It was like, and I'm not lying here, it was like king of the Sunday Mail, and on my left side was John Barnes, who had scored for England in the Maracana. So that was a ready-made feature interview. And on my right side was Roberto Revellino.
Really?
We obviously won the World Cup in 1970 in Brazil. So, and there was a guy who could translate and he spoke a bit of English. So before we kick off, I'm working for a Sunday paper and I phoned the gaffer. And he's like, I said, I don't care how this game goes. We've got a great paper at the weekend. And he's like, what are you talking about? He said, well, wait and see how the game goes. And I said, I've got exclusives with John Barnes and Roberto Revellino. We're fine. So it was unbelievable. Those kind of, for a guy for the Murray and East Kilbride squad, that was pretty good. I was quite happy with that one.
Brilliant. We'll move on to your team. Obviously, I want to ask you first of all, what's your formation you've got in mind for this team?
I'm going to go 1-4-2-3-1. So there you go. That's how coaches. You've got to mention the goalkeepers now when you're doing formations and coaching courses. Otherwise, they feel isolated.
Brilliant. How are you doing it as well? Is it going to be Old Firm players? Have we got a few kind of surprises?
Well, I thought about 2 ways, but I thought the one that would cause most arguments was Old Firm players. So I'm going to go with Old Firm players in the 20 years that I was working as a writer. So it's basically from 1994 till 2015.
Brilliant. We'll start off with the goalkeeper. Who have we got between the sticks?
Could only be one for me, Andy Gorham.
Right, okay.
Andy Gorham, for a variety of reasons. First one being that I wrote his book, so I think he would fly over and have my windows put in it in Nova Scotia if I didn't put him in. But I think just because I was very close to Tommy Burns, and strangely enough, over here in the North American Scottish coaches, Tommy Burns' son Johnny is a technical director at Florida Celtic, and we're close. And I just remember Burns, as well as that famous quote, like Andy Gorham broke our hearts and stuff like that. He said on his tombstone it would say Andy Gorham broke my heart. Just because the amount of times in Old Firm games and big games that Gorham pulled off just unbelievable saves, like in big games, just exactly like McGregor did in the Old Firm derby at the weekend there. McGregor's as close to Gorham as I've seen, but he was just I found him fascinating as a guy. It was obviously there's a lot of front page stories about Andy and stuff like that, but a lot of that ignores the fact of how good he was in goal, because he wasn't a big guy. He's literally in modern terms, he's below 6 feet, 5'11.5", I think. And Alan Hodgkinson, his coach, said to me once, at that point, Alan Hodgkinson was training Andy Gorham at Rangers and Peter Schmeichel at Manchester United. And he said to me that he had to work doubly hard with Gorham because Gorham had to make 2 steps across goal for every one that Schmeichel made. Yeah. And it was so that just, when you put into context the saves that he was making, I mean, I watched a few just as some research for this. And the save from Van Hooijdonk in the Old Firm game, it still baffles me how he was just unbelievable, and just so many qualities. And I think I listened to someone at the weekend, pundit that I usually agree with actually, and I'm trying to remember, I think it might have been Michael Stewart, saying they thought McGregor was above Gorham because of the use of the ball with his feet, and I thought, nonsense. I mean, the goalie was above his, way ahead of his time with his distribution from feet, a natural athlete, played cricket for Scotland, and actually he got fined once when he was at Hibs for going to play internationally for Scotland instead of being at something with football when he was, and obviously a massive character off the field, but I think concentrating too much in that takes away from how good he was as a goalie. I was lucky enough to cover a lot of amazing stories with him, including getting to Manchester United at the end, which was just frightening, and loan, which was a great story. But no, so I'd go with Gorham. Gorham would be my goalie. Brilliant. We'll move on to right back. Who's in there? Mm-hmm. This might surprise a few people, but it's I went for Jackie McNamara. Okay. And simply because it takes me back to a season, as I said, close with Tommy Burns, and there was a season when in 97, 98, I think, when Rangers obviously won the league. It was not 97, 98, but 96, 97. Was it the year they won the final one of the 9, I think? Yeah. 97, 98 was the year they lost it. Mm-hmm. And McNamara was part of a Tommy Burns team that were just unbelievable to watch. Just so good to watch. They had that Bumblebee away strip. I don't know if you remember it. Yeah. Great away strip. Simon Donnelly was in that team. Obviously the three amigos, Cadetti, Van Hooijdonk, Tom, Di Canio. Yeah. great players. They were amazing to watch. And I think they lost one league game all season. I am correct in saying that. They lost one league
that's
game.
right, yeah.
Too many draws. And Jackie and Sid up that side were just so good to watch. And they're both guys that I stayed pretty close with, like through my career when they became coaches and managers themselves. So that's a loss to the game. They should be in the game now. I know Jackie had a health problem there, and he was also a terrific guy to deal with as a media guy. Always called you back, really humble, which came from his dad. His dad's a terrific player as well, and his dad's a trade unionist, great guy. Jackie McNamara Senior, and I loved watching Jackie play, and I always thought he was really underrated. Like a good kind of modern day fullback. And when I was going through that 20 years, Scott, there was like maybe a couple other ones at right back, like Gary Stevens, but I only really saw the tail end of Gary Stevens, who was a fantastic athlete. Tavernier now. Tavernier's season this year's frightening. His numbers are unbelievable. I just think McNamara probably better defensively. So that one probably caused a bit of controversy, but I went for Jackie McNamara at right back.
Definitely. We'll move on to the other side. We'll move on to left back.
Could only be one out of the ones I saw is Arthur Newman. And Newman, I think I'm right in saying the year before he came to Rangers, I saw him at France '98.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And it's always the tough thing about when Scotland go out as a journalist is you're always trying to convince the office that you should be kept at a tournament. Unless you're like, in those days, unless you were like Chiefy Alex Cameron or, one of the Jerry McNee or the top notchers, they'd always drag you home once we were out because they can pick up the stuff from elsewhere. And I managed to stay out there in France until the quarter-final, which was at the Stade Velodrome in Marseille. And Newman was playing in it. And I remember watching against Argentina and just watching and thinking, geez, this guy's coming to Scottish football. I couldn't believe it.
Did you know that at the time that he was going there?
There was whispers of it at that point, yeah. And he was just frightening in the tournament, just such a good player. And when he came to Rangers, it's a Rolls Royce, just like unbelievable, like up and down, a fantastic athlete. And I had a wee kind of claim to fame in that, and that one of my best mates who had grown up was Rab McKinnon. I don't know if you remember Rab McKinnon. He played for Hearts and Motherwell and Newcastle. Went to 20 Enschede, one of the first Bosmans, and he went to 20 Enschede. And he got in the 20 Enschede Hall of Fame ahead of Arthur Newman.
Oh, did he?
Because Arthur Newman stayed there and went to, he was only there briefly at left back, and he went to PSV Eindhoven, made his name there and all that kind of stuff. So that's Rab's claim to fame. He's from the Greenhouse in the Murray, and he beat Arthur Newman into the Hall of Fame at 20 Enschede. But now Newman, I think, was again probably ahead of his time, and when it comes to how high you see Barisic playing now, Barisic probably like it's been stunted a bit in the last few games, but at the start of the season, like Tavernier and Barisic are so high as almost as auxiliary wingers, and Newman played like that, a decade to 15, 20 years ago. He was just like, I'd never seen a left back like that bombed forward so much and so positive, scored so many goals. And it helped that he was Dutch, and most of the Dutch guys are amazing to deal with when you're a media guy. And he was like, never, I think he gave me his mobile on day one and never changed it.
Really?
He was fine, never changed it. Never changed the mobile the whole time he was in Glasgow, and just an absolute gentleman. He was really good to deal with, but he was some player. When you look now, what would he cost in the market now?
I know.
I'm pretty sure Rangers signed him for something like 5 million, Scott. Something just low. Like, what would he cost now?
I know, it's crazy. See just when Advocat came in, like that 98-99 season, like were you surprised at how well that team done? Like just how quickly he managed to turn around the team? Obviously, Walter Smith to a team that were going for 10 in a row and 40 million, he changed so many players. Was that how big was that to report on?
It was interesting because never really dealt with anybody like that before. He was really guarded at the start before he'd made up his mind who he could trust.
Right.
But as to how the team was going to go, they were throwing money at it, so there was class players coming in, and you're looking and thinking, well, De Boer and that kind of thing. I can never forget that day when Hartson and De Boer came to Ajax for the medicals and stuff like that. And I thought at that point Hartson would have been, and I still stand by it, became a good pal of mine. Hartson would have been an amazing signing for Rangers at that point. I actually think Hartson's more more of a Rangers number 9 than a Celtic number 9. You know, like I always thought that would have been a hero in Ibrox, but for one reason or another, he failed his medical, and Ronald passed his, despite the fact he couldn't straighten one of his legs. But there you go. How medicals go. I always remember Billy Dodds telling me that he could never. Ronald's knee was done, but he was Ronald de Boer, so he passed his medical and John didn't. No, it was interesting it was always interesting to watch Dick at work, and then when you got in, and it was interesting because he took on our culture a bit after that, because there's not a culture in like Holland to be that close to the journalists, really.
Right.
But by the time we got to, you know, I can remember at Euro 2004, myself and Keith Jackson getting invited to the Dutch camp by Dick to go down for a day in Faro and stuff like that, and he was still like, he still remembered everyone from Scotland and always looked after them if you came into the Dutch camp. It was good.
Brilliant. We'll move on to centre-back. We'll start with the left side of centre-back. Who have we got in there?
Either my two centre-backs could play either side. They're so good, but I had Virgil van Dijk on the left side.
Right, okay.
So at 5. So I had him there because just, well, it speaks for itself, I think, the amount of money he went for. And I always, it's funny, I was talking about him the first year I came here. There's a convention for all the coaches called the United Soccer Coaches Convention, and it was in Philadelphia. And John Park, who was the head chief scout at Celtic, and John was the guy that spotted Virgil van Dijk at Groningen. And when you look back now, got him to Celtic for 900,000, which is, I mean, he cost 75 million. So you're like, to spot like a 900,000 pound centre half. But it was funny because I was with a few Scottish guys who were on a night out. Stephen Caldwell, who used to play at Newcastle and Sunderland, is out here as a pal of mine who's at Toronto. He was at Toronto FC as captain, and he's on the television here now. He's like a TV journalist now. And he was with me, and Stuart Kerr, who used to play in goals with Celtic, was out as well. So he was there. Neil Collins, who's chief head coach at Tampa Bay Rowdies, used to play at Preston. So a lot of Scots. So naturally we were in the pub. So we're having a few beers, and John was coming, and I said to them, we had a sweep about how long it would take him to mention Virgil van Dijk. So everybody had like, in typical Scottish fashion, we were all like tearing up a bit of paper and throwing in, like, you had to pick out a number for how many minutes. And I said, first 10 minutes. So we were trying to steer the conversation into like old firm conversation. And John was at, was it at that point? Vancouver, Whitecaps, I think it is. He was at Whitecaps as head of recruitment. And sure enough, it was 9 minutes it took him. 9 minutes. But to be fair, if I'd spotted Virgil van Dijk, I'd be mentioning it every 5-10 minutes as well. So it was, but that tackle this season. If they win the league without him, then I think that's a triumph for coaching for Klopp.
Definitely.
And it was a scandalous tackle. Anyone that knows anything about football knows what Pickford's doing there. You know,
no, definitely.
He's cleaned him out and he's wrecked his season. It's a shame because he had a viable claim, I thought, for the Ballon d'Or. You know, I thought in the Champions League season he was unbelievable. Just never looks in danger, does he? You know, he's never looks in danger. He's reading of the game, his pace and his use of the ball on the way out and all that. Fantastic player.
Brilliant. Who partners him on the other side?
Had to be Goffey for me. You know, like I think Goffey's like Richard Goff for me is. That's your captain, isn't it? That's if I was in any team of men and 11 men, you'd look at your captain. I used to think they actually deliberately hurt his head so he could put bandages on. You know, there's so many games when you look at him and he's like pouring blood and all that. You'd never be allowed now. But it was just like, you know, in both boxes, I thought like just amazing that like coaches say games are won in both 18-yard boxes, you know, by what you do. And the amount of times that you saw like last gasp headers and to clear things, or in Cyprus with Scotland where he scored in the 97th minute with a header and to win 2, and even just in finals and all that. I remember him scoring, I'm pretty sure after it, he scored a winner in the League Cup final against Celtic. Yeah. And then happened to mention to me in the next week that he was playing with a broken bone in his foot. And you're like stuff like that. And I don't know if you remember, it was a great goal. He dinked the goalie and just like stuff like that. I thought he was like, you know, Walter used to say he was a great defender for someone that couldn't kick the ball properly and stuff like that and all that. And I'd heard that before about Willie Miller, who's very similar, you know, who like said his technique wasn't great and everything, but what a defender. just like put your house on him really quick. I think you could always see that he'd been reared as a fullback at Dundee United because he had that recovery pace and all that. Fantastic athlete, always up the front at training, and just a great example. I thought he was a really good, just a good defender and a good captain. And I always thought he represented Rangers really well in good times and bad. I can remember after they won 9 in a row, there was a night out after they won 9 in a row. I don't know if you know the Steps Bar in Glasgow. That was their kind of
I've heard it, yeah.
For drinks. It wasn't the most salubrious place. And Charlie Miller was outside. And there was a kind of like, a few of the journalists were there for the tail end of it. And Charlie Miller was outside taking the hubcaps off cars. Because that was his party trick, because he was for Castlemilk. And I just remember turning around in the pub and seeing Goffey's got him pinned against the wall type thing, and he was like, don't behave like that when you're out with Rangers type thing. I just remember there's the bits that captains do that people never see. He would complete the back four, Scott. I'd have Goffey in there.
Brilliant. Some back four. We'll move on to the midfield. How are you doing it? Are you doing with a sitter and 2 players next to them, or?
Two kind of holding midfielders, and then basically my front 4.
Right, okay.
So the 2 behind, and then 3, and then a number 9.
Right. Well, we'll start with the left side holding. Who's in there?
Left side holding is Barry Ferguson.
Right, okay.
Well, left side holding, Ferguson is like, I think because sometimes, again, I did the book, so I'd get shot if I didn't put him in. But he's what a footballer. I think like box to box, and just like could do. I mean, putting him in sitting midfield's probably but he could dictate games, and I thought from a very young age, Scott, I always felt he was underrated in Scotland, maybe because we prefer people smacking, and he could smack any tackles, don't get me wrong, but we prefer people to be more like maybe Iain Ferguson, or like players like that. We like players like that are 50-50s and all that. Barry had such a football brain, you know what I mean? Like from a very young age, I can remember him dictating games in Europe against unbelievable sides, like PSG and stuff like that.
Remember the game against Leverkusen?
Aye, Leverkusen, he's brilliant, and you forget then he's 18, 19 years old,
exactly.
He's like a young boy at that point. And he came into and captained, when Dick made him captain, came into a team full of internationals, and he was made captain at, like, I think 19, 20 years old, something like that, 21.
Mm-hmm.
And fantastic. And I think always kind of regret that he chose Blackburn, and he chose Blackburn. I was really friendly with him at that time, and if he'd waited, Hooley was at Liverpool, and he could have gone to Liverpool,
right.
And Everton went for him as well, and he chose Blackburn Rovers. And I remember going down for the signing and everything, and we were driving around Blackburn, and he's like, he's saying to me, I can't believe I'm going to work for Souness. And I'm saying, I can't believe you came here. What did you come here for?
Would you think that was a deciding factor for him going to work with Souness?
100%.
Right.
100%. There was Souness. He wanted to work for Souness. Souness was his hero. He wanted to work for Souness. And to be fair, he was brilliant until he got a bad injury.
Kneecap, wasn't it?
He did his kneecap and then went back, and then he obviously ended up coming back to Rangers. But I just looked and I thought he was better than that, to be honest. I looked at Blackburn. They weren't the Blackburn of Sutton and Shearer, they weren't at that level. And I thought, wait, just wait. If he'd waited, I think if he'd waited a week, Hooley would have taken him to Liverpool. And
really?
I thought that was the kind of stage he deserved. I think when you look now, like Ferguson and Gerrard in the one midfield would have been pretty special.
Definitely.
But there you go. But no, I think he deserves to be a Rangers legend. And I'm glad to see, I know it's at Kelty Hearts, but I'm glad to see he's still involved in football, because I know how much he just loves the game. I'm glad him and Bob Malcolm are there at Kelty Hearts, and I hope they get them into the league.
Yeah, here's hoping. We'll move on to the right sider holding midfield. Who you got next to him?
Paul McStay.
Right, okay.
Paul McStay was, for me, carried a club on his shoulders through probably some of the worst years.
Yeah.
The years even when the stadium was being rebuilt and they went to Hampden and all that stuff. And I know for a fact could have left 3-4 times. Mm-hmm. And again, when you look at transfers out, should have left. Like Celtic were in a state at times, and he still stayed because he loved the club so much. And I just remember, like, one of the kind of saddest kind of sights I've seen for a player when you know how much it means to them, was when he missed the penalty against Raith Rovers in the 1994 Coca-Cola Cup final. And great story for Raith Rovers. And for me, personally, when we went on to coach, Ali Graham, who was part of that Raith Rovers team, is a big pal of mine and from school, and played together at school select and all that. And Ali was part of that team. So it's an amazing thing for Ali that he won a trophy. He went on to have like 600 odd games in the pros. Ali, great player. But McStay that day when he got the penalty, I knew he was going to miss.
Right.
You could see him walking up. If you ever watch it on YouTube, he just looks white when he's walking up, and you're thinking, oh my God, he's going to miss this, and then he missed it. And I felt so sorry for him, because I knew how much the trophy would have meant to him, and also to Tommy Burns as well, and all that. And you're thinking, but they won the Scottish Cup the year after that in a terrible final against Airdrie. It was an awful game, but I was glad they won it, because it was McStay is just like Gough. I think they're the measure of how Old Firm captains should behave.
Definitely.
Like McStay was like an absolute gentleman, and he's out in Australia now and doesn't really get involved in much. He was always quite quiet, but he could have gone to Serie A, to a couple of clubs. He was that good.
Yeah,
at that point, we never had many players in that era, Scott, that could go to Italy, and he was one of them.
Yeah.
So, great player, and I always thought as well, box to box, and scored some spectacular goals for Celtic.
Yeah,
and Scotland as well, which was a great Scotland player as well.
See, just before we move on to your former midfielders, just obviously when you started in 1994, the famous story then was the Fergus McCann coming into Celtic. What's your memories of that?
I remember interviewing him at the top of the stand, which was, we had to wear hard hats and all that, and that was like, and I'd kind of arranged an interview, and when we were walking, just the strangest wee guy, when you were walking out, it was quite like a, but then when you started talking and all that, he just made cold, logical sense. It's such a emotional city to work in.
Yeah.
As a journalist for football. And it's strange because like over here, like I've just moved from Toronto, you've got soccer's not, as you would call it, football's not like maybe even the fourth sport in Toronto. You've got the Maple Leafs ice hockey, you've got Raptors basketball, you've got Blue Jays baseball, and then you might come to Toronto FC, even when they won the MLS or whatever. So in a massive sporting city with a lot of passion, but it's all different sports and all that.
Yeah.
But Glasgow just, it's like two teams, that's that. And if you say you support someone else, people go, aye, but who do you really support? Glasgow. If you're in Glasgow, I used to hate that. Like I must say, if you support another team, it must be murder. You'd be like. I'll always remember, every time I would go out for a pint with wee Jack Young, and they'd be like, "You're not a St Mirren fan, you're a Rangers." You get it all the time, and he actually is a St Mirren fan, but he just get like pelters. Like, you're a Rangers fan, his whole life you get pelters, and the passion of it was just be like Fergus took it cold, like just cold business, right? And name me one other guy that walked out of Scottish football having made money.
Exactly.
That owned a club. Doesn't he harm? He walked out £40 million richer. So it's just like, after taking a team, a club that was on its uppers and nearing administration. But it did an amazing job. Very singular wee guy. But the way into it was always, he had a tremendous PR guy called Peter McLean.
Yeah.
Who's a really excellent at his job, brilliant at his job, and very intelligent at putting, if Fergus said something that was like controversial or incendiary, Peter would be in right away like Malcolm Tucker. He didn't really mean that. What he meant was, he was brilliant at it. So Fergus did an unbelievable job. Saved the club.
Were you surprised though at the time? Obviously, remember when the league flag was getting unfurled, they were booing him. Were you surprised then that was happening?
I think that's Scotland, isn't it? It's such a it gets so, it's like it gets so polarised. Everything gets so exaggerated and polarised. And don't get me wrong, I've been in the middle of that, writing the headlines and writing the stories and whatever. It's just when you get a bit of distance from it and look at it, it's like I was watching the game at the weekend and I listened to some of the phone-ins when I was driving out in Nova Scotia, and there's a debate raging about was it a red card or was it no? And I'm looking at it, it's a stone wall red card.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at it, it's like when you look at it dispassionately as a coach, I had been, when I coached the East Kilbride in the Lowland League, they would take you to the meeting with your captain before the season. And you would look at it and go, you get told different stuff about denial of a goal scoring opportunity. Here were the 4 things you needed to look at. So you would look at these things and you look at these things, and then I'm listening to the guys, and even Lenny, to be honest, after the match, he's saying Ayer's covering him. And I'm thinking, no. He's like 35 yards away and he's deeper, he's miles away. You drive 5 buses between Ayer and Beaton, and that's the problem, right? The problem being Beaton's a midfielder who's playing centre half, so he's out of position and Duffy's on. And there's a million things you could look at in that, but it's just an example of how things get so polarised, and somebody gets blamed. So at that point, it's a deflection tactic, isn't it? It's like, blame Bobby Madden, blame whatever, right? And I get it, like that's what coaches do, both sides do it. But with Fergus at that point, it was just like, he's not spending enough money, we're back to the biscuit tin, it's this and that. And then, but to boo him when the flag was getting raised was like, but then you look 5-6 weeks ago at the height of Lenny's, and there's fans attacking buses, there's things on the outside at Rangers, both sides it gets like, it's an absolutely unique city for that, for the passion. And out here, people will say to me, you've been to a few derbies, and I remember doing a series at one point and going to derbies like Milan derby, Liverpool derby, Tottenham Arsenal, and people saying what's close to it, and I was like, do me a favour, not close. There's nothing close to it. Maybe I never get the budget from MD to go to River Plate and Boca Juniors. That's supposed to be mental. I'd love to go to that one, but nah, nothing's close to it, and I think that's why it is. It just gets so heightened. Maybe in a build-up to the ceremony of the flag. Yeah. People's passions get the better of them, and I'm sure some of those fans that booed that day will look back and think, what was I doing, Definitely. Reflect on how he was historically for the club.
Definitely. We'll move on to your front 4. We'll start with left wing. Who's in there?
My 3 behind the striker are going to be, because they can interchange. This is how I managed to get them on the team. That's why I went for this for much. So on the left side, we're in 11. I went for Brian Laudrup.
Right.
So because Laudrup could come in off that side, he was unbelievable to me. And I think the one thing that people don't realise, Scott, when you knew him, or when he walked in day one, and he came to Rangers after a really bad time. He'd been getting transported out of Fiorentina training in the trunk of a car. He was in the boot of the car, because the Fiorentina ultras were going mental because they weren't playing well and stuff like that. So he'd not been doing well at Fiorentina. And Walter got him, when you look back now, Walter got him for 2.7. Which is ridiculous. And just ridiculous. And people can argue about Michael being a better player, and I'm sure Michael was a legend, his brother, but the time Laudrup was at Rangers, it was just unplayable at times, and he'd score ridiculous goals and solo goals. He's just so good to watch. It's just absolutely. It's ironic that the goal that won 9 in a row should be a header. I think it's the only time I never saw him header the ball. Honestly, I was it made me laugh. There's 2 elements of that goal. Charlie Miller crossed it with his left foot. And
that's right. Yeah.
Just never. But he was, again, when you go back to Newman. Interviewed him in the first day he came to Rangers, and it was always a battle, to develop a trust with a player and be given the mobile number. That was your kind of job. And he gave me the mobile number on day one, I think, because Walter maybe told him to develop a couple of guys he could trust in the media. And it never changed. The whole time he was at Rangers, and even when he went back, I would still phone him for, nostalgic pieces or whatever. Yeah. And he's just a gentleman as well, just a great guy. But what a player. And I think the thing that people never realised about how quick he was, he's rapid, quick, but also how big he was.
Yeah,
he's tall. Brian's a unit. Brian's a unit. He's over 6 feet, 6'1". So you're talking about a physical specimen coming in. It's not he would look because he stooped over that way when he was dribbling and all that, but he was 6'1". He's a unit. And for a winger, great finisher, scored some amazing goals for Rangers, and always I thought you could look at him in Old Firm games again and let go of him, and he would produce, when they needed him to get him a goal, and he was a frightening player. Laudrup in that. I think he had to be in it.
No, definitely. We'll move on to right wing. Who's in there?
coming in a different position, but I put Henrik out there. So Henrik Larsson is on the right of my three because he could play anywhere. When you look back at his start, and I remember the first game, he gave the ball away to Chick Charnley, and Chick Charnley scored at
That's right, yeah.
And Celtic lost. And people were saying 650 grand for this guy. they were only saying that when he left, were they? No. So I think when you look at the only one I can think of recently who is, and this might sound silly, but I think like one of the biggest Old Firm transfer steals recently is Glenn Kamara. Like Glenn Kamara for 50 grand is frightening, but Larsson cost 650,000.
Yeah.
From when Janssen bought him, and you're like 242 goals in 315 games.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Frightening. You know, his stats were frightening, and how good a player he was. So clever. You know, I remember like in Seville, and if you weren't in Seville, like watching it on the telly and all that, it was like it's hard to describe how hot it was in the stadium that night. It was like a furnace, literally. Like I think the temperature was maybe 90 degrees, but obviously because of you're in that that arena, and it was so hot, and he just never stopped, and he scored 2 unbelievable goals and almost won it. You know, like on his own first, he was unbelievable that night, and I think that showed me just how good he was. He's just like such a clever player, great finisher. I think when you think back to the 6-2 game and his finish over Kloss, and then nutmeg. I think he nutmeg Colin Henry and then chipped Kloss.
Yeah.
Frightening goal, brilliant goal, and he was just such a good player. Movement, and I think it was great for Scottish football that after he left Celtic, that he went to Barcelona and Manchester United and did it as well. You know, like they still call him the saviour at Barcelona because of the Arsenal Champions League final.
Yeah.
And I watched a few games when he was at Barcelona. I watched a Clásico when he was at Barcelona, and he would often be on the bench, you know, because they had a few decent players up front. You know, they were like that wee Argentinian guy, whatever his name is. He was good, but they were like. But the minute Larsson came off the bench, 90,000 would stand. He was just revered. They loved him, and I loved that because you always get all that stuff for the English press, you know. Oh, it's a pub league or it's a Mickey Mouse league, or I couldn't do it if he went elsewhere. Well, when Sir Alex Ferguson needed a striker on loan, who did he go to?
Exactly.
Went to Larsson, you know, and he had a brilliant, you know, spell there as well. So no, I thought he was class, and like deserves a nickname that he's got, and he's a king of kings. He was an unbelievable striker.
Definitely. Who plays behind the striker?
Gaza. Had to be literally the best player I saw playing for either side of the Old Firm. For 18 months at Ibrox, the 8 in a row season, like Gaza won it on his own. For me, I mean, just like that's over exaggerating. That is like me throwing in a typical Sun exaggeration there. Didn't win on his own, but it was like I remember the day they won it, like the 3-1 game against Aberdeen, scored a hat-trick, and it was just a run from like, inside his own half. And I remember Alan McLaren telling me on the field that Alan McLaren just went to him, Gaza, we need something, do something, and he just took off. And it's like a comic book goal if you look at it. There's players hanging off him when he's running through, and he was just so strong. I actually liked him when he was heavier. You know, he would always. Walter explained to me at one point that he described it as like a binge mentality that Gascoigne had. So if he was eating, he would eat too much. If he was drinking, he would drink too much. And then when he decided he needed to get fit, he would be in the gym too much. So he would go 4 times a day. He's just like that, you know. Obviously, he's got demons in his head, but like it was unbelievable for 18 months. And I honestly believe he played the best football of his career at Rangers.
I've always been told that. Like he was up here. He was the happiest he was. Maybe said that.
Absolutely, madman off the park. I mean, some of the stuff, like sometimes when you were like in the press go, you would get to go on some of the nights out for a few pints, and I'm sad that's kind of changed now with social media and stuff like that. It wouldn't happen now, but you just seen him like give money to, and there's not like apocryphal or an urban myth and all that. He would literally go into his pocket and give £500 to a tramp and stuff like that. Or if there was someone there who was like he felt was down in their luck, he would pick them up and make sure they had like he was just such a Jamie, a guy that way. And he's obviously like, there's loads of things that he's done I'm sure he regrets. Like, but as a footballer, just natural and unbelievable close skills, great finisher for a midfielder, and strong, man, just strong. You know, like when you watch that goal, the eight in a row goal, and some of the other like goals that he scored for Rangers and commanding games, just didn't quite do it in Europe for Rangers, which I think would be a regret. But and that team should have done better in Europe with Gascoigne and Laudrup in it. But domestically, he was immense, and he is. I know my dear old dad, God rest his soul, always went on about Baxter and all that. But like when Gascoigne was there, he said he's the closest. You know, he said he was the closest he'd seen, and he was definitely the best player I've seen play for either side of it.
What was the best story you can remember?
Gaza. Coisty still tells it. He broke into Coisty's house. He actually like they were up the stairs. So Coisty's up the stairs with his missus and just a minute, Renfrewshire, and he heard like people moving down the stairs, something happening down the stairs, somebody moving down the stairs, and he's like, well, so he's gone into the wardrobe, got like a 9-iron. He's literally going down the stairs with a 9-iron, ready to club a burglar. And he goes in and he sees a light on in the kitchen and he's kind of creeping and he goes round the corner, looks in. And Gaza was making a sandwich for himself out of his fridge. Gascoigne lived a bit like a mile away or whatever. And he's like, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? And he goes, I was hungry, there's nothing in my house. And he's sitting like making himself a like tomato and mayonnaise sandwich or whatever it was. And McCoy's just like, go to the house, go to the fucking house. You know, and he's like, you know, and like children screaming and all that. He's like, you know, and he was like stuff like that. And like obviously like, everybody's heard all the jury, you know, leaving the fish in Dukey's car and stuff like that. I mean that was, and jury was like, jury had a great, like a really hot temper, you know. I remember Dukey telling me that story like about like he did it twice. Dukey discovered one and he put another one in, and he just used to, he would literally put them under, you know, where the spare wheel used to go in the back of the car. He'd put them, lift them up when they had Hondas at that point. It was Hondas they had, and Dukey's was his pride and joy because it was like a CRV or whatever, and he would like he lifted up and the fish he had caught and put it in, and Dukey's like driving around, car stinking of fish and just stuff like that. And like, and there's so many. The one that Gorham gave me for the book was fantastic. After the Euro '96, and they come back after the summer and all that, and he's obviously scored that goal against us after Gary Mack missed the penalty. And Henry's at Rangers by this point, right? So it was like, I think, it was, wasn't he? So it was like, and they go back into the dressing room when they're waiting for him to return, you know, and basically give them pelters about England beating Scotland. And he came back in and he had in the old Rangers dressing room, he had goals set up with traffic cones. And there was a traffic cone with a mop stuck in it in the middle with the hair. That was Colin Henry. And he had a beach ball. And he was keeping it up, flicking it all the mop and then volleying it into the net and saying Gascoigne scores. And then he was getting one of the apprentices to do the dentist chair celebration, and Gorham had to be held back from him, you know. So Gorham, I was just those. I did a thing with him actually, like a few years, like just before I came away to Canada, like a speaking thing. I don't know if I can repeat that story, but he was talking about like a part of Les Ferdinand's anatomy. Honestly, I can say that word, can't I? There's nobody censoring this. He sat down, I'm not kidding, Scott, he had notes written in this kind of slanting writing. And I was trying to keep him on track because we were syncing to a video. So I would try and say, anyway, Paul, the 8 in a row goal, and he'd be talking about Les Ferdinand. And I'm like, so his thing was that he went into the England dressing room and he said he was just knocked out because Les Ferdinand was the most well-endowed man that he'd ever seen in his life, right? And I was like, of course, we're in a kind of mixed company. It was like a dinner crowd at the hotel. And I can see all the women going, I'm like, oh, Jesus. And then I look at his notes, and he had all these notes like Walter, Coisty, whatever, and written in the middle with a big circle in it was Les Ferdinand's cock. And I'm like, at some point, he's going to drag me to this story. So the video's going up at the Rangers Aberdeen game and all that, and it's like you know, a hat trick and all that, and I'm trying to keep him on track. And it was honestly, I just went. There's actually a video of me. I went like that with my scripts, went like that, flung over. I said, "Just you talk, guys. I want you go." And he was like, and that was him. That was his story. He wanted to tell a story about how he said it was. He said it was so big it was swinging in the dressing room and there was a wind. Happened his hair. I'm just sitting in this stage going, Jesus Christ, you know, I'm just lost, you know, I'm just like, that was it. Game over. But he was class. He was class as a player. And I hope, you know, when you look at industries should look after people like that better.
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
Like, you know, and hopefully people are looking out for him. I know all his teammates still do so.
Brilliant. Definitely. We'll finish up with the final position. Who we got up front?
Coisty. Had to be McCoist for me, just because I think Rangers' greatest ever goal scorer in it, and I think 355 goals in 581 games. I think
that's right.
He's told me a few times, and also he's from East Kilbride like me. So, like growing up, like we grew up, like we're not far off each other's ages and know each other like really well because he's from my hometown and all that. And he was just like, but there's loads of things I admire about Ali apart from. I mean, he's a riot and a night out and very funny and really funny guy. I've always thought he was hugely underrated as a player. He's just a really good player. He's a brilliant finisher. And all that stuff about lucky. You don't get lucky 355 times, you know what I mean? It's like, and if you look at the variety of goals he scored, I mean, he scored some amazing goals for outside the box. My favourite one in Euro 96 against Switzerland when he's...
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
I had one top bin there and scored out like... I think the one thing you look for if you're an Old Firm player is you need to deliver in Old Firm games. Mm-hmm. It's the thing that will always haunt Morelos when he leaves Rangers. Like at the end of the day, 14 games in now, he's never scored. So people say to me, "Oh, Morelos has got the European scoring record," and I love McCoist's line, as understated as anything in BT Sport. He said, "Yeah, he's done really well. 22 goals in the Europa League. It's a tournament I'm not familiar with." Which I thought was brilliant. Yeah. Of course, he scored them in the Champions League. So his 21 was a lot of them in the Champions League, you know, and a tournament I'm not familiar with. I loved that. And as usual, BT, they didn't pick up on it, right? And I'm decking myself laughing because I know he's having a dig, right? And but I thought just like he's finishing, but I just admired the fact I can remember. I actually remember the game way back at the start. I'd be a teenager at the time when the entire stadium was singing "Coisty, Coisty, get to."
Yeah,
some chances in a Scottish Cup game against Dundee, I think it was, and they lost the game. And you know, he'd just come up for Sunderland where he'd had a nightmare as well. He hadn't done well at Sunderland, going down there as the next big thing from St Johnstone. It takes a lot of bravery that, you know, to come back for like a start when you get the whole stadium giving you pelters, and to come back and basically prove them all wrong. And I think it's 27 Old Firm goals, but I think they beat Mr. McGrory's record.
Yeah.
Like Old Firm games, Celtic fans must have hated them, you know, like because even, I remember one semi-final at Hampden, place was getting rebuilt, but it was still like pretty full. And Davy Robertson gets sent off after 6 minutes. And Rangers played 84 minutes with 10 men and McCoy scored the winner. Mm-hmm. And it was like, there's another one, Gorham made an unbelievable save from McStay that night. McCoy's got one chance. That's right. One chance, pouring rain, one chance, netted it, you know, he's just like, and I like the fact that in that 92-93 year he won the Golden Boot, you know, because like that season he proved his class. Scott, you look at that back post header against Leeds. Yeah. He scored in that run. You know, he showed how good he was.
Was that the season he broke his leg?
Yep. Broke it in the April against Portugal away for Scotland. So got battered 5-0 that night. And Oceano broke his leg. Big Portuguese defender. But by that point, I can't remember how many goals he'd scored by that point. He still won the Golden Boot. He was out in the April, you know. But it was, he's won European Golden Boots, and you would always get that stuff again, you know. He would never have done it, and I would. You know, if he moved at his peak, he would have scored goals. He was just like, uncanny knack of knowing where to pick up the rebounds. And I love watching now. Like, if you get, like, he's one of those guys, because he tells one-liners and stories so well, and it's easy to do that, like at Rangers Celtic, and get all the laughs, right? The ones that I enjoyed, he was involved in when I was coaching at East Kilbride, he's very friendly with James Keane, who's the kind of brains and the money behind East Kilbride. And I was coaching there, and there was a couple of nights where we'd be at James's house, and it was just us downstairs, and James had like a snooker table and all that in a bar and whatever.
Yeah.
But you just stand, and I remember just him and I one night, and just explain, tell me how you do it. I was like a kid. I was just like, I want to know how do you do that? How do the movement and all that? And he explained to me about, breaking your neck to get near post in front of, just waiting, and then he would know when to go near post and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes he would just stand still in the box because that was the best thing he could do. And then anticipating rebounds and stuff like that. And I was just like how he scored so many goals, and it was fascinating. There's an art to that.
Yeah.
There's so many guys that you see that don't score those 6-yard box goals anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It was funny. I watched that goal going in at the start of the weekend. Coisty would have put that over the line. I'm watching Morelos, right? And it drifts towards the back post. And if you watch him, see if he'd made an effort, that could have been his old firm goal.
Yeah.
I don't know whether he thought it might be offside or whatever, and he didn't realise it had flicked off McGregor. If that's McCoist, it's McCoist putting that in and taking the other goal.
Definitely. Definitely. See, when he got appointed manager, obviously we know what happened after that, but do you think there's ever been a person in such a difficult situation in history in Scottish football?
Difficult. I think certainly towards the end of Tommy Burns' reign at Celtic, he was you could compare that kind of thing, where so much is happening behind your back. But no, he didn't have to deal with Craig White and Charles Green and all these charlatans, like that kind of stuff. And I felt for him then. And as a coach, like the season before it, I'm pretty sure he would admit himself. I look at, and obviously I'm in a different thing. It's youth soccer that I'm coaching, but you have to be organised as a coach, and I'm pretty sure Coisty would be the first to admit he's not the most organised guy in the world, Like you need Durante there with him and all that, but it's different now, like that gig is like you have to do what Gerard's done, you have to get people around you, and Durant would be great in the training field, but behind them they probably needed more support than they got.
Yeah,
if they'd been able to have Walter in there or whatever, or as a director of football or whatever, that would have helped. But I know Walter wouldn't have wanted to be near people like Craig White and stuff. Although he did do some roles at that point, but it's poison chalice at that point. I think he had 1 year where things were half decent, and then it just collapsed on him. Like with the lack of finance and all the stuff you're facing, and the type of players that you've got to bring in, and Bosmans or whatever. Isn't he? But part of getting through when they went back down, the fact that he stuck around and got them through the third division and the second division or whatever it was before they went back to the championship, I think speaks volumes for him. And I know he loves the club. He's genuinely, you don't hang around that long at the club if you don't. And I think it's great that he's making, because he's got past that part. When he went on telly at first, like we were talking about earlier, I wanted him to show them the tactical nous that he's got when he's watching again. Yeah. Because he doesn't understand.
Oh, he's brilliant. See his commentary, he's brilliant.
Fantastic, man. Yeah. I just thought at the start, Scotty was trying to live up to that cheeky chappy stuff.
Yeah.
But now, when I watch it now, I'm like, that's the one that was there that night. I was in the James Keane's basement in East Kilbride, when it's a privilege to listen to him talking about football, because he does see things like, I think he spotted right away Laxalt's positioning at the goal at the weekend, and also like where Beaton and Ayer were and stuff like that. He knows the game, right? He knows the game inside out, and he's bringing that now. And it's funny, you get like people tweeting and from down in England going, "Oh, this guy Ali McCoy's really good. He knows the game," and I'm like, "Gee, really? No, you're kidding me." But they don't realise how much gravity he's got to speak about it.
Yeah, definitely. So that was the team. I think that's one of the best teams we've ever had. Just for class. Is there any kind of players that you thought just kind of missed out? Like,
yeah, there's two that I definitely. There's one that I definitely have on the bench because he could play everywhere. I'd have Sutton on the bench.
Right.
Like, I love Sutton in midfield. I used to love watching Sutton in midfield in Europe. And Chris was a clever player. When you think about it, played centre half, midfield, and striker for O'Neill's team.
Yeah.
I thought he'd be a great guy to have in reserve. I would have thought. The right back one, I think people will always argue with, but I just love Jackie McNamara as a player, and it was more as a memory of that season, because they played unbelievable football that season. I never really, like, the end of my, I was friendly with Coop, but he was kind of at Motherwell and at the end of his, and I knew him through Rab McKinnon, and I loved him as a guy, and Coop was like McStay in that era where Rangers were rubbish.
Yeah.
And he was the only reason people went to the football. You know, he's just such a good player. And it's the same as like McStay was, and stuck with, you know, a bad team. And it's a shame for Cooper that the Soonest Revolution came when it did. Too late, you know, he was like 30, 31 at the end of, you know, and so Coop probably. Current day players, I don't know so much. Maybe I've just get the kind of rose tinted glasses for the era. But I was lucky. The era that I wrote in and watched these games in, Scott, I think was when there was times then when both teams had a lot of money,
definitely,
and bigger finances than they could, you know. And to think that I'm lucky to have seen Gascoigne, Laudrup, Larson, Van Dijk, you know, these type of players now. You're not going to see, you know, they're going to have to scout pretty well, you know, to get players like that. But it shows you can do it. You know, if you get Kamara at 50 grand, I think Neil McCann did Rangers a turn there at Dundee, that's for sure.
Did that, definitely. Iain, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, mate. Thanks very much for doing that. I really appreciate it.
No worries, pleasure.
Brilliant, thank you.
All the best.